I'm Jay Smith. I'm a professor of history at UNC-Chapel Hill.
And I'm Mary Willingham, and I used to work at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and I'm currently doing some tutoring and working on a literacy project and in between jobs.
And we're here to talk about the academic fraud case at the University of North Carolina. There's been some effort among a bunch of professors to move forward, move past this case, and I wanted to ask you, what would it take for UNC, to get past this academic scandal?
Well, for beginners, I think it would be nice for the institution's leaders to lay out very explicitly for the community what they have learned or what they believe they have learned from the scandal. They've had a number of committees reviewing our processes for a couple of years. It seems like they ought to be able to issue a report in which they've laid out what they've learned and how we made the mistakes we made, where the weak spots were in the system, and then how they're going to address them. If they're really ready to move forward, that ought to be a relatively easy task.
One of the recommendations that I would make after working in the athletic department and the academic support unit for 7 years would be that we should look at the transcripts. We can look at the worksheets or the transcripts. That's the only way that we're really going to know if our students, our athletes, are getting access to a real education. What is the path? What is their progress towards degree? We don't need to hide behind FERPA. We can de-identify transcripts. We can de-identify worksheets. We can separate out the profit sports, because those are the sports that I would worry about the most. But I would say to this group, prove it. Prove it. Prove that these young people are getting a real access to a real education, and then perhaps we can move forward.
Is that something you think Division I schools should be doing around the country, not just Carolina?
Yes, definitely. The Drake Group just put out another position paper, and in that paper it's going to talk about academic fraud, and in that paper the recommendation is to every year have an independent body of faculty, perhaps at your peer institution, take a look at those transcripts, and that would perhaps solve some of the problem, although we still have a lot of other problems that we need to handle within college sport and within the model that currently exists.
Yeah, it can no longer be taken for granted that the Division I schools are operating on the up and up. On the contrary, it should probably be taken for granted that something is amiss behind the scenes. And so transparency has got to be the watchword of the new system, whatever reforms are implemented in the next couple of years.
Okay. The NCAA is in the middle of an investigation here. They're back in Carolina looking at this academic scandal. What confidence do you have that the NCAA will be able to get to the bottom of this and figure out what happened and take appropriate action?
Well, we don't have a great deal of confidence in the NCAA just in general. And history suggests that when they step in to investigate an institution, they look for ways to identify individuals who are allegedly responsible for all of the misconduct that took place. They like to remove those individuals and claim that the system nevertheless maintains its integrity. So they're not inclined to look at systemic issues. And so we're at least a little bit skeptical about what's going to come out of the NCAA.
I think for me what's so sad is that the NCAA will come in and strip titles, but that won't really solve any issues moving forward for that group in particular that wants to move forward. And that the athletes did win those games. They are athletes first and not students first. And the model needs to be completely changed, and I think we have to dismantle the entire NCAA, so whatever they decide really becomes irrelevant in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Your book came out, an actual book itself, in bookstores last month. What has the response been?
The response has been, I would say, almost uniformly positive so far. We've got some good notices in the press, and we've heard from a lot of people who have expressed their gratitude for having taken the trouble to write the book.
We're very happy that it's been well received and that it's out there and that people are reading it and talking about it. because really the point of writing it was to get people around the country to talk about the issues, the academic issues in particular with college sports, and how these young men are not getting the real education that they've been promised.
Yeah. You know, one thing in the book that I did want to talk about, and that was, you know, the Kenneth Wainstein's report talks about these fake classes really kind of starting in like 1993. Your book talks about, you know, that there were earlier issues that were a part of the development of this, you know, this scheme, this system. And can you talk a little bit about this is in the late 80s, as I understand it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we'll let the historian talk about that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's very clear from the earliest records of Julius Nyongaro's independent studies offerings that his independent studies courses were geared toward men's basketball. They were essentially set up to help men's basketball players. That's as clear as day if you look at what he was teaching and who was taking his courses. And you'll see that the people taking those courses, the basketball players taking those courses, got generous grades, much more generous grades from Julius than they were getting in their other courses. So we can't say with certainty that those were fake courses or paper classes, as would turn out to be the case by the late 90s. But it sure looks like the template for the later fraud was set by the late 80s.